Well, hey, Keystone, last week I invited you a little bit into my world as I'm trying to figure out how to process a Sunday's message. One of the things that the SLT will pray about every Monday is that the Spirit of God would continue to bear fruit in the lives of our people during the week. And so I've invited the other pastors here this morning to be able to ask them the same kind of question. How's the Spirit of God working in your heart and mind as you reflect and process from Sunday's message?
I can jump in and answer that, Brandon. Being the pastor who oversees the prayer ministry, I just love to hear messages on prayer. So thanks, Keith. For me, my prayer life during this stay-at-home time is actually pretty good right now. I like to pray with others more than I do praying by myself. Maybe that's strange, I don't know. But I really do like to pray with others. And working from home gives me more opportunity for Liz and I to pray together. And also the Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday corporate prayer groups have been bigger than ever. I love that. I participate in 2 of those prayer times, and it's just been good. However, Sunday's message convicted me in an area that I have not been doing so well at. Keith, it was your hairpin turn illustration that got to me. I think you said something that if we miss or ignore the sign that warns us about a hairpin turn coming up, we can get in big trouble. Now, in my own spiritual disciplines that I've been going through, actually, I've been going through this book called The Discipline of Grace, God's Role and Our Role in the Pursuit of Holiness by Jerry Bridges. It recently challenged me to grow in patience and fight irritability. God uses computers to test me in this area, and honestly, I don't do so well. Nothing pushes my buttons like when a computer does not do what I want it to do. And during this stay-at-home time, guess how I'm doing all my ministry work? On computers. As I sit here at my desk, there are actually 4 computer screens around me, and I'm multitasking.
Well, that's part of your problem. You've got too many computers going on.
Maybe that is the problem. It'll probably solve itself because I'll probably get so mad I'll throw one of them out through the window.
Just make sure it's a Mac that you throw away.
Well, in Keith's sermon, I realized that what my hairpin is, or hairpin turn is, Liz sometimes has trouble working on her computer, and she asks me to help her figure something out. Well, it's bad enough when I have trouble with my computer, but for some reason it's more irritating when I have trouble solving her problems as well. Well, as soon as she asks me for help, I should see the warning sign for that hairpin turn, for that trouble that's coming up. That I'm going to lose my patience, and I'm going to get irritable. I'm going to flip out and be ugly. So if this sermon does convict me well and there's some growth, what will happen is as soon as she hollers for my help, I'm walking over to her desk to help, I should be praying. I should be praying like the disciples should have been praying. I should be praying for patience and not to be irritable, and to extend grace and mercy and to help her with the problem, whether I'm able to figure it out or not. So that's what I'm working on. That's what's working on me.
That's great. Kyle, well, what about you?
I think when I thought about that question, the thing that probably stuck out to me immediately from the sermon was one of the quotes you used near the beginning, Keith, from Soren Kierkegaard, which I took the next minute of your sermon to try to figure out how to spell Kierkegaard then.
There's an extra A in there.
Which I spelled it wrong, I realized as soon as I wrote it down. That God can only be met by despair. I think that was the quote I was debating. Was it by despair or in despair? And I've just been thinking about that quote, been wrestling around with it a little bit of, I'm curious if you guys have thoughts on this then too, of, I think I know what he means or what you mean by using it, Keith. I think of, okay, God, I guess I react to that quote. God can be met outside of despair. God can be met in our joy. God can be met in his goodness. God can be met in other ways. But I take what he meant and how you use it, Keith, to God can only be met by our despair, thinking when we despair of ourselves, when we come to the end of ourselves, when we realize that our resources are not enough to carry us through this life. Like Charlie's example of, I don't have the patience here to be able to help Liz and not express frustration. God, give me the patience. So I think that quote has been, has stuck out to me, partially because I think in this time, there is at times more despair for me and not being able to see people, or not even really knowing how to do ministry at times when I can't gather with students or whatever. And there's this despair of, how do I do this? How can this possibly be working? And to realize that's good for me to despair of myself, and to realize I don't know how to do this, and to force that, or let that force me to run to God in desperation.
Keith, is that the kind of desperation you had in mind when you were using that quote?
I was thinking about, when I approached the message last week, I kept running it through the frame of, I'm an American Christian. I'm an American Christian. I'm an American Christian. And, talking to people from other parts of the world, it's amazing how, in the title of an article I pulled off the internet recently, how terrible Americans are at prayer, and how much prayer marks the rest of the Christian world. And his top, he has 4 reasons, and he says the top one is America is independent. And as Christians in America, we're marked by that as well. We're independent. And I don't know what you guys have found, but prayer becomes so significant and essential mostly when I'm desperate. It can become something that gets set to one side the rest of the time, or unless I'm preaching a series or a sermon on prayer, then prayer's in the front of my mind. But I think that if Kierkegaard would have written that today to America, I think as Christians, we I get that, and how easily prayer can become this perfunctory ritual performance. But when I'm at the end of my rope, I have no place to turn but God. And he's always there waiting, longing to see us come long before we get to a point of despair. But I think despair is a great gift to us as believers, because it forces us into his arms.
Yeah, I mean, that's what looked like the main difference between the disciples and Jesus. And the disciples, they knew they should pray. They were instructed to pray. And I think that probably a lot of Christians know that we should, because somebody like one of us has instructed you to pray. But what separated the disciples from Jesus, or Jesus from the disciples, was that Jesus had to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Like he understood the magnitude of the situation that awaited him. And so his response was, I know that I should, and I have to. I need this.
For me, the most impactful thing, both in preparing that sermon and giving it, was I'm someone who believes deeply in the brokenness of the human condition, that we are sinners both by nature and by choice, as Adam's children by nature, and by choice as people who choose to sin. And I see it in everybody's life, but no more clearly than my own life. And yet, I don't think enough about, I'm going to face temptation today. I'm going to face temptation in the next hour. And to be to use the words of some, to be prayed up in such a way, as well, use the words of Jesus, pray that you will not yield to temptation. And then we get, or at least I do, I get in the midst of temptation and I realize I'm ill prepared. I've gotten there. I haven't cried out to God expecting to be here. It's almost like I know that my past and my present are marked by sin, but there's some naive part of me that assumes that the future is not going to be marked by sin, and therefore I'm not prayer equipped for it.